Today's episode is being brought to you by Podcast in a Weekend. That's right. After being closed for over half a year, our most popular class is now open for enrollment. Save your seat at yongpratt.com/podcastinaweekend. All one word. Starting a podcast doesn't have to take years, months, or even weeks. You can literally go from zero to podcast this weekend, October 25th through 27th, 2019. In fact, we've had students complete the entire class in as little as 4 hours. How is that for fast? When you save your seat today, you'll get instant access to the first 4 units, and the remainder will open up on Friday, October 25th. If a podcast has been on your wish list, there is no better time than now, especially when your podcast can be up and running by this weekend. Save your seat at yongpratt.com/podcastinaweekend. Welcome to this second bonus episode of the week and part 3 of 4 in our mini-series, Variety is the Spice in Your Podcasting Life. Today's spice, frequency, or how often will you publish your podcast episodes? Hi there, I'm Yong Pratt. I'm your host, and I help female business owners launch and grow their podcasts quickly and easily by repurposing the content they're already creating so that they can grow their audiences, expand their reach, and gain more clients. What's your frequency? As a podcaster, you get to decide how often you'll release episodes to your listeners. Your choice is based on a number of factors, including the goals of your podcast, your audience, which we covered in episode 242, as well as the other commitments on your calendar. One of the biggest myths I hear when it comes to podcasting is, I don't have enough time, or some variation on the lack of time or wishing for more time. The good news is that I love saving time and showing my students how to get more done in less time. You might be thinking, yeah, that sounds good, Yong, but I'm super busy and I really don't have time to create a podcast. I have kids, a family, a business, I have pets, and a social life. Well, sometimes. How am I ever going to squeeze one more thing into my already packed schedule? I've so got your back. One of the reasons I choose to work with female business owners is that I can understand the demands of running a family and a business and constantly being pulled in many directions. And I'm here to help make sure your life is easier and more simple by focusing on doing less. A podcast doesn't have to be one more thing on your to-do list. It can be the one thing that drives everything in your business forward, especially when you learn to repurpose and automate the content you're already creating. And that is exactly what I teach inside of Podcast in a Weekend. One of the topics we cover is frequency and deciding upon what makes the most sense for you and your business right now. And as I've said in every episode of this mini-series, you can always change and adjust the frequency of your podcast as needed. So long as your listeners know when to expect episodes from you, the frequency is totally up to you. I would recommend a weekly podcast and twice monthly at bare minimum. Inside of Podcast in a Weekend, choosing your frequency and how you'll let your listeners know when they can expect to hear from you is just one of the many lessons. Inside of Podcast in a Weekend, you'll learn how to create your systems and build your very own podcast automation machine. so that you can start working smarter and not harder in your business. Graduates often tell me that with a podcast, they're actually saving time because of the systems and automations they've put into place for their podcasts. Here's what Kim White, a graduate of the very first session of Podcast in a Weekend, had to say about the class. Yong Pratt and her revolutionary podcasting process are making history by giving the quick step-by-step instructions to implement in one weekend her powerful system. She is known as the Repurpose Queen for a reason. I now have a podcast and have saved more time during my week than I would if I didn't have a podcast. Seems crazy, but true. On average, my graduates are saving around 3 hours per week with a podcast than before they had one. What would you do with an extra 3 hours each week? Head over to yongpratt.com/243 and let me know what you would do with an extra 3 hours on your schedule each week. Before signing off, I want to invite you to join me inside of Podcast in a Weekend. You can get all the details as well as save your seat at yongpratt.com/podcast-in-a-weekend. Tomorrow, for our weekly Wednesday video, I'm hosting a live podcasting Q&A. If you have questions about podcasting or Podcast in a Weekend, I invite you to join me on my Facebook page, Podcasting Ninja, at 1:01 p.m. Pacific Time. Until then, go on and save your seat in Podcast in a Weekend at yongpratt.com/podcast-in-a-weekend, and you can start crafting your podcast today and then launch by this weekend. I'll catch you tomorrow. Cheers.